The shocking truth behind the Good Samaritan's dilemma: they faced unexpected trials in faith. Few knew what truly happened that night on the dusty road between Jericho and Jerusalem. A storm brewed in the hearts of men, shrouding the air with tension. What seemed like a simple journey turned into a crucible where faith was tested and souls were revealed. An undefined figure, battered and bruised, lay gasping for breath. His blood mixed with the earth, crying out for mercy. Shadows loomed as footsteps echoed ominously, a priest, a Levite, each faced with a choice that would echo through eternity. The glimmer of silver coins in the priest's pouch clinked as he hurried past, eyes averted, heart tight. Fear gnawed at them. Could they be seen as weak? The crowd watched, breaths held, anticipation suffocating around them. At the same time, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows of uncertainty. This wasn't just a scene of charity, it was a conflict of identities, a test of what it meant to be good. Who would rise to the challenge? Who would ignore a brother in need? Each moment lingered like the thick dust on the road, every choice heavy with consequence. The man who stopped, the Samaritan, was an anomaly in a divided world. He knelt by the wounded stranger, trembling hands reaching out. Compassion flowed like a river over stones. A gasp escaped the onlookers. Could someone from the hated tribe step forward, where the righteous perspired with indifference? He bandaged wounds, pouring oil and wine, sacred symbols of healing, yet whispering against the backdrop of possible danger. Would he suffer for this act? As he lifted the man gently, an unnatural wind stirred, a murmur crackled through the crowd. Was this divine intervention, a test of faith? The priest's cohorts exchanged glances, disbelief painted across their faces. Doubt crept in like a thief, making them question everything they believed. The Samaritan's heart raced. Felt both elation and fear. Would he become the victim of violence for his choice? The night swallowed their cries, leaving only the soft moans of the injured man, and there stood the question, echoing louder than any voice: what is true goodness? Is it the man who walks away, or the one who kneels? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. A hush fell over the gathering as the Samaritan's compassion illuminated the darkened path. The air was thick with unspoken words, mingling with the scent of oil and wine, swirling around as if to affirm the miracle of mercy. In the shadows of the night, the wounded man slowly opened his eyes, and the first sight that graced his vision was the Samaritan's worn face, a visage weathered by trials yet radiant with kindness. Who are you? The man murmured, his voice laden with confusion and pain. I am a traveler, much like yourself, but I have not let my journey render my heart callous, the Samaritan replied, his voice unwavering. Each word seemed to carry the weight of promise as he gently cradled the man's shoulder. The onlookers strained to hear, caught between the narrative they had always believed and the unfolding reality before them. What will you do now? The wounded man asked, eyeing the Samaritan's preparations, gauging the risk he had taken. I will take you to a place of shelter until you are well, he answered, his demeanor reflecting resolve. Yet, within him brewed questions that only the silence of the night could answer. Would his act of kindness be received, or would he be chastised for seeming too rigid against the norms of society? As they prepared to leave, the priest and the Levite lingered at the edges of the scene, their hearts rattling like loose stones. Trouble churned within them, a savage mix of envy and remorse that stung like spilt wine. Had they truly despised him merely for his origins, or was their discomfort born of fear that perhaps the Samaritan understood goodness in a way they could not? The priest approached, his voice trembling. Why risk your safety for a stranger? You know not what is at stake. He is a man, no different from you or me, the Samaritan responded, his gaze steady. In our shared humanity lies the power of connection, and in that connection, we find our salvation. A murmur rippled through the crowd, dividing them as whispers bounced from ear to ear. The Levite stepped back, feeling exposed and uncertain. What was it that his heart desired, self-preservation or compassion? In the shadow of a man whose very identity was questioned, he felt small, as if stripped by the truth laid bare. The Samaritan, with the wounded man secured upon his sturdy shoulders, turned to leave. Look beyond what you see. Goodness is not a title bestowed but an action carried through. With that, he continued down the dusty road, feet pressing forward into the night, while the priest and Levite remained, caught in contemplation, barriers built high yet beginning to tremble. As they watched his retreating figure, they could not shake the gnawing doubt that had begun to seep into their hearts. Had it taken a breach of identity and preconceived notions for them to truly reflect on their own righteousness? And so the question hung in the air, deeper than the shadows around them: to what lengths are we willing to go in order to uncover what it means to be truly good? As the Samaritan and the wounded man traveled along the winding path, the cool night air whispered around them, mingling with the rustle of distant leaves and the quiet murmur of nighttime creatures settling into their nests. The weight of the man on his shoulders brought a heaviness, yet the Samaritan moved with a purposeful grace, each step a testament to his resolve. The wounded man clenched his eyes, grappling with pain and the flickering glow of gratitude. "Why do you help me?" he dared to ask, amidst the rhythmic cadence of their journey. "You risk everything for one unworthy soul." The Samaritan replied, "In risking everything, I gain a part of myself that has long been dormant. You may see yourself as unworthy, however, I believe every soul carries the essence of the divine. It is our duty to honor that worth." As dawn began to bless the horizon with its first blush of light, the Samaritan's path took them near a village. The chatter of villagers began to punctuate the air, a tapestry of voices woven together in the morning glow. However, uncertainty gripped the Samaritan. Would his actions be received with the same grace he had sought to extend, or would his kindness draw scorn and judgment? A sudden sense of urgency clutched at his heart. He paused, settling the wounded man gently on a rock at the roadside, allowing him to rest. "Trust in this moment," he said softly, "for we cannot control how others perceive our deeds, but we can choose the intentions behind them." In the village, the news of a Samaritan aiding a wounded man quickly spread. Some met the tale with a sneer, recalling an age-old enmity steeped in centuries of division. Others eyed the Samaritan with curiosity, wondering if perhaps they had misjudged one among them. Was it possible that goodness could flourish outside of their own traditions? Just then, a group of villagers, led by an elder with glistening silver hair and wise eyes, approached. "What manner of man are you?" the elder inquired, his voice carrying the weight of skepticism mingled with intrigue. "You carry a burden that does not belong to you." "I carry a fellow human being," the Samaritan responded, standing tall with determination rekindled. "In this world, we are bound not by lineage or creed, but by the call to love one another." The elder frowned, contemplating the words, while the gathered villagers exchanged glances of doubt and reflection. Some seemed moved, wrestling with their own biases, while others clung to the old ways, unwilling to let go of what they had always known. In that moment, the wounded man found strength enough to speak. "In my time of despair, it was this Samaritan who saw me, who acted without consideration of his own kinship or safety. What does it tell you about yourselves, that I, a stranger to him, became his burden?" A hush fell over the crowd as they began to ponder. The elder looked down at the ground, wrestling with a truth that stirred uneasily within his chest. "Indeed, it is a strange thing to be faced with our own hearts," he finally said, looking up with a mixture of wonder and fear. As they stood upon the precipice of newfound understanding, a deeper question emerged from the stirred souls before the Samaritan. "Can compassion dare to dismantle the walls we have built?" the elder began, "or will we retreat to the shadows of our comfort?" The Samaritan held the wounded man's gaze, feeling the shared weight of their connected destinies. As dawn's light broke over the village, the world felt twice as heavy with the burdens of relational strife and the possibility of transformation. Would they choose to embrace the stranger among them, or would fear and tradition bind them once more? The question lingered like the last note of a bittersweet melody, echoing into the expanse of their shared future. As the sun ascended higher, illuminating the village in golden hues, the air thickened with anticipation. The Samaritan, still cradling the wounded man's gaze, sensed that this moment was pivotal, not just for them, but for all who bore witness. The elder, still poised in contemplation, stepped forward. This act of mercy, it defies understanding. It unnerves the very foundation upon which we have built our lives. We have always been taught to view Samaritans as lesser, as another. Yet here you stand, weaving a tale that challenges our beliefs. The villagers murmured amongst themselves, their opinions flickering like the morning light through the trees. Some held tight to tradition, their hearts hardened by years of inherited animosity, while others felt a rising tide of curiosity, yearning to explore the hidden truths of the world beyond their borders. "Tell us, Samaritan," another villager called out, her voice trembling with unyielding skepticism. "Did you come here simply to flout our laws and customs? What is your true intent?" The Samaritan felt the weight of the gaze upon him, shadows of doubt creeping along the edges of their words. "I came seeking no recognition or reward," he replied, breathing deeply to calm his racing heart. "I came because I could not turn away from suffering. In my heart, I carry the same pulse that beats within every soul." "We are not so different." When stripped of titles and roles, the elder's brow furrowed as he mulled over the implications of those words. "If we are indeed similar, then how must we act towards one another? How do we reconcile our past with this new understanding?" The wounded man, still resting against the rock in a fragile state, raised his voice again. "Perhaps the first step lies in vulnerability, the willingness to expose one's heart. I was wounded not just in body but in spirit by the division I have known. Yet, this Samaritan's act opened my eyes. What would it cost for us to turn our judgments into empathy?" An uneasy silence enveloped the crowd. They began to ponder not merely the act of kindness they witnessed but the deeper transgression of their own hearts, what grievances they might have nurtured against those they deemed outsiders. "Time will tell," the elder murmured, half to himself. But change is a tumultuous tide. When one dares to venture beyond familiar shores, peril often follows. Will this upheaval bring us closer to one another, or further into discord? In that moment, the air crackled with the electric current of possibility. A child, a mere observer of the adult world's burdens, ran forward, her small voice laced with innocence. "I don't understand why people can't just be nice. If we help each other, isn't it simple?" Laughter broke through the weight of tension, a shared moment that bridged the gap of ages and experience. Yet, it was tinged with a ripple of discomfort as the villagers remembered their long-held beliefs. Could it really be as simple as a child understood? The Samaritan knelt before the child, his heart swelling with the beauty of her untainted view. "Maybe," he said, "in our quest for understanding, we must learn from those who see without the haze of judgment. In your simplicity lies a profound truth. Kindness can indeed pave the path to connection." The elder felt the stirrings of something deep within himself, as if scales were falling from his eyes. "But how will we forge this connection in a world so rife with discord?" He wondered aloud, the question haunting the AIR.AS. The villagers began to grapple with the unsettling notion of unity. The Samaritan placed a comforting hand on the wounded man's shoulder. "Step by step, we can choose to redefine who we are together. The choice lies with each heart before me. Will we allow fear to dictate our actions, or will we choose to illuminate the darkness with our courage?" The question lingered like dew on the grass as the sun continued its ascent, bathing the village in the warmth of a new day. Boundaries had begun to blur, yet an unsettling uncertainty lingered. Would the villagers kindle the spark of connection, or would the burdens of the past prove too heavy to bear? The answer awaited them in the uncharted territory of their collective hearts. As the light of the day grew, a slight wind carried the scents of blooming flowers and freshly baked bread through the village. It was a day of awakening, but not free of the tumult beneath the surface. The people, now standing at the crossroads of tradition and transformation, mustered the courage to ponder deeper questions that lingered in the warmth of the sun. The elder looked at the Samaritan, his expression softening amidst the tumult of thoughts. "What do you say to those among us who still cannot look past the boundary of our labels?" he asked, seeking not just answers but the depth of the Samaritan's spirit. "That I in every encounter, the Samaritan replied, we are faced with choice. Will we focus on the divisions that separate us or the shared humanity that binds us? His words hung thick in the air, challenging the villagers to confront the nature of their understanding. That a murmur rippled through the crowd, igniting discussions of old beliefs, challenged perceptions, and the fear of vulnerability. The wounded man, now visibly stronger, leaned on a crutch, compelled to echo the Samaritan's message. Isn't it the fear of the unfamiliar that breeds injustice? He asked. Much of our pain comes from rejecting what we do not understand. What if we dared to move toward one another instead? The villager who had initially questioned the Samaritan stepped forward again, her skepticism shifting ever so slightly. And what of our sacred laws? Can we allow compassion to supersede the boundaries we have upheld for generations? There are dangerous threats from outside our village that can seep in. True, the Samaritan acknowledged, nodding with understanding. But heed this, what hinders our growth may very well be the walls we construct in our hearts. Can we find strength in love that supersedes law, bridging what divides us? As the words landed, the elder pondered the scripture his forefathers had handed down through the ages. If we were to embrace this new path, he mused, what assurance do we have that we will not lose our identity along the way? How do we protect what we hold dear while seeking to transform our ways? The child's innocent voice interjected once more, cutting through the complexity of adult debate. What if being nice is actually our identity? The simplicity of her thought made many smile, yet others cast furtive glances, caught between the lightheartedness of youth and the burden of maturity. Amid this spirited exchange, a figure emerged from the outskirts of the gathering. It was a traveler, dusty from the road and weary yet full of stories. The villagers hushed as she approached, curiosity igniting in their eyes. I have come from afar, she said softly, and I have seen the impact of kindness across many lands. In towns divided, it is love and understanding that prevail over fear. She looked earnestly at the villagers, her presence commanding their attention. I have witnessed the disarray in places where animosity rules. When spirits are closed, pain flourishes. But where hearts bravely intertwine, miracles unfold. What kind of miracles? Questioned one villager, intrigue replacing suspicion. In moments when barriers fall, the traveler replied, the human spirit rises. I have seen enemies become allies, divisions become unison. When we dare to let down our guard and approach the other with loving intentions, something profound happens. As she spoke, the air thickened with emotion, a swirling confusion mingled with hope. The elder, feeling the stirring in his own heart, turned to the Samaritan. Could our community dare to venture into this unknown? He asked, his voice carrying a tremor of fear wrapped in a cloak of burgeoning faith. The Samaritan met his gaze, the kindness in his eyes unfaltering. It begins with a single step, elder. We must allow our spirits to seek connection first, and trust that our identities will be richer for it. Yet even as hearts began to open, a question loomed larger than any one voice could contain. What if their willingness to change led to unforeseen trials, ones that tested not just their relationships with one another, but also their faith in the vision of a united front? Could they sustain their courage in the face of adversity, or would the shadows of their collective past unravel the ties they were beginning to weave? The village stood at the brink of a journey, faithful yet fearful of the unknown that lay ahead. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a warm glow over the village, the air buzzed with the tension of unmet expectations and shifting beliefs. Faces lit with intrigue turned towards the traveler, who, embodying the spirit of connection, began to share more of her journey. Her words were a tapestry, woven with tales of struggle and redemption. Have you ever found yourself in a place where kindness seemed like a luxury? She asked, her voice a gentle breeze among the restless villagers. I have traveled through deserts of despair and seen spirits crushed under the weight of mistrust. Yet it is in those very sands where I witnessed the most beautiful acts of compassion. One villager, emboldened and curious, raised his hand. But traveler, how can we be sure that what awaits us on this path is not merely a mirage, a fleeting illusion that can lead to pain rather than healing? Have you faced such trials yourself? The traveler nodded solemnly, her gaze piercing into the heart of the crowd. Indeed, I have. In a village much like yours, I bore witness to a community torn apart by fear. They shared a history filled with wounds that festered over the years, and yet, through the smallest act of forced rangers, a shared meal, a conversation around a flickering fire, a bond formed. The villagers leaned in closer, caught in the web of her narrative. Though there were those who opposed this newfound unity, emboldened by their fears of losing their identities, they also found courage through love. The path was riddled with trials, yes, temptations to retreat into familiar enclaves of comfort and suspicion, but they pressed forward, revealing deeper truths about themselves and one another. Intrigued, the elder raised a hand. And in the midst of these trials, when faced with the inevitability of conflict, how did they sustain their faith? What prevented them from reverting to the shadows of their past? The traveler smiled gently. They discovered that in every trial, there lay the opportunity for growth. Their faith was not blind, it was not simply a set of beliefs to cling to amid confusion. Instead, it became a living, breathing witness to their connections, the threads binding them across differences. With each passing moment, the atmosphere was electrified with possibility, yet a softness lingered as some villagers glanced at one another, silently pondering their collective fears. The wounded man, now leaning on his crutch with renewed vigor, added, "What about when doubt creeps in? When we falter, how do we remain steadfast on this path?" "Ah," the traveler responded, her eyes reflecting the understanding of countless miles traveled. "Doubt is a companion that walks with us, but it does not own us. It serves as a teacher. The key is to share our doubts openly, to be vulnerable as a community. In the act of sharing, we become stronger, allowing us to uplift those weighed down with uncertainty." With her words hanging in the air like the sweet scent of blossoms in the spring, the villagers were compelled to deliberate. Unsure but emboldened, they exchanged glances, some skeptical, others filled with a spark of hope, eager yet cautious to tread this uncharted territory. The elder, sensing the stirring of a desire to embrace this journey, chimed in again. "Even so, there are those who might resist, who would cling to the certainties of their divided loyalties. How will we address the tensions that will inevitably arise?" A moment of silence washed over the crowd, thick with unspoken fears and long-held beliefs. It was the child's laughter that broke the spell, a light-hearted, innocent laughter that flowed through like a creek through rocks, refreshing and spontaneous. "What if they just need a hug?" she exclaimed, the clarity of her perspective piercing through the anxiety surrounding the adults. Laughter erupted, but a weight of solemnity returned as questions arose in the minds of the villagers. If tendrils of doubt threatened to strangle their aspirations, could a simple gesture truly bridge the chasm that years of division had carved? As the traveler prepared to leave, she offered a farewell filled with promise. "Remember, the choice to embrace one another begins within each heart. Will you walk this path together, even as the storms gather?" Her presence faded into the distance, but her challenge lingered, echoing through the minds of the villagers. Each face bore the quiet mark of reflection, holding within the tension of aspiration and doubt. They now stood at a pivotal juncture. Could they dare to journey together into uncertainty, all while holding sacred the pieces of their identities? Or would fear overwhelm the promise of their newfound connection? With the horizon stretching wide before them, they faced not only the unknown trials of their imminent path but also the questioning of their faith as individuals and as a community. Could they cultivate the strength and courage to bind themselves together, or would the shadows of their past pull them apart once again? As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, a sense of urgency filled the air. The villagers, though inspired by the traveler's words, found themselves grappling with the complexities of their shared journey. They gathered under the sprawling branches of an ancient olive tree, its gnarled roots symbolizing the strength that could emerge from facing adversity together. That evening, the village elder called for a council, summoning not just the villagers, but also those who had remained silent, those who feared the vulnerability of change. Voices rose, overlapping in a chorus of concerns and hopes. "What if we fail?" One woman spoke, her voice trembling. "What if seeking connection brings only more pain?" A hushed silence followed, the weight of her question hung heavy like a storm cloud. It was then that the wounded man, crutch firmly planted on the ground, raised his voice. "But what if we don't try? Will we continue to allow our fears to govern our lives? Perhaps it's not just the fear of pain we must face, but also the pain of remaining stagnant. His gaze swept across the crowd, inviting them to confront their unacknowledged fears. Drawing from the depths of his own scars, he continued, "In my suffering, I have learned that healing cannot happen in isolation. Nature teaches us that even the strongest trees bend with the wind, molding themselves around obstacles rather than breaking. Are we not like those trees?" The villagers pondered the wounded man's insights, contemplating their own stories of suffering and survival. It became clear that together they stood on the brink of something profound. Could their shared vulnerabilities indeed lead to a deeper understanding that transcended their differences? A young girl, inspired by the dialogue, stood up beside her father. "When I fall, someone always helps me up. Isn't it the same with our hearts? Shouldn't we hold each other when times are tough?" Her innocent perspective sparked another wave of murmurs and nods of agreement, resonating with the simple yet powerful nature of compassion. The elder took a deep breath. "What this child speaks of is the foundation of community, yet we must acknowledge the storms that arise from differing beliefs. If we share in our struggles, can we risk our hearts opening wide enough to include those with whom we disagree? Would we have the courage to love where love feels foreign?" The villagers fell silent again, each wrestling with the notion of loving beyond comfort zones. Their histories were filled with divisions, marked by walls built from pain, accusation, and pride. They understood that the journey towards connection would not only be fraught with joy but also littered with trepidation. In the quiet that ensued, an older woman spoke up, her voice steady yet soft. "But what if love is not enough? What if someone's life path does not align with ours? Can compassion still bridge the gap when our beliefs contradict one another?" The question lingered, echoing deep within each heart present. It was a reminder that their journey was less about marching towards consensus than about learning to walk alongside one another despite their differences. The challenge of embracing opposing views beckoned them with both uncertainty and hope. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, a profound sense of mystery enveloped the gathering. What path lay before them if they dared to weave their lives together? Would their stories intertwine in ways that illuminated truths previously unseen? The villagers were left no closer to answers, but the weight of their unspoken fears was slowly being transformed into a resolute understanding that together, they bore the potential to face the unknown. As hearts resonated amid uncertainty, they could not help but question, what if, in pursuing a shared journey of love and compassion, they became the very embodiment of hope? The traveler spoke off. Would it be enough to mend their divides, or would they stumble into conflicts that held the potential for greater discovery? As the stars above glimmered like distant promises, the villagers, now deeply invested in their candid discourse of fears, hopes, and the shadows of their past, knew they were at a precipice of revelation. The elder felt the weight of years pressing upon his shoulders as he regarded each neighbor, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight, etched with lines of both resilience and trepidation. "What will we do if we are truly to embark on this journey together?" he asked softly, but the tremor in his voice gave life to the unvoiced anxieties. The question hovered in the air like the smoke rising from the flames, subtle yet omnipresent. The wounded man, moved by the elder's question, hesitated only a heartbeat before responding. When we look at the parable of the Good Samaritan, we see how compassion was not merely an act, but a choice made in the face of societal division. The Samaritan chose to embrace vulnerability in a world that demanded separation. Could we not do the same? His words struck the collective consciousness of the gathering, igniting a flicker of hope amidst their uncertainties. A hush reigned momentarily as they grasped the implications of his challenge. An elderly farmer leaned forward, his weathered hands trembling as he spoke. But in that story, there were trials that tested the Samaritan's faith and decision. What trials might we face as we seek to love one another fully? There was a tremor of anxiety woven into his question as he replayed the horrors of estrangement he had witnessed in his lifetime. A young man, his brow furrowed in thought, responded, "Perhaps it is not the trials themselves that matter most, but how we choose to face them." The Samaritan's actions were birthed from seeing not just the injured man, but also the potential to forge something new. He glanced at the crowd, daring them to consider how they might respond to challenges they could not yet foresee. "It takes courage to lift the veil off our hearts and truly see one another," said the woman who had first voiced her fears. Yet, I can't help but wonder if seeing also means confronting our own darkness and biases with full honesty. What if the truths we uncover about ourselves impede our collective progress, their voices intermingled, the rhythm of their dialogue like the wind whispering through the olive leaves above them? Would they be able to bear the weight of their misgivings? Would becoming more compassionate mean laying bare the harsh realities of their own failings? Just then, the village child from earlier wandered closer to the firelight, her tiny hands gripping a small stone smooth and cool to the touch. She had been silent, but her gaze held a knowing depth, and when she spoke, her innocence carried the weight of wisdom. Just like this stone fits in my hand, don't we all fit together somehow? Even rough edges can smooth out with time. Isn't that part of why we're here? In that moment, her words landed softly like dew upon parched soil. Perhaps there was a glimmer in what she had drawn for the prospect of reconciliation through the acceptance of imperfections. But alongside these nettled feelings of hope, unasked questions lingered. How would they reconcile their differences without causing further pain? Could they embrace the challenge of facing not just their neighbor but also the truths about themselves that might prove discordant? As the night deepened and the sky took on a deeper hue, the villagers sat in contemplative silence, wrestling with the threads of the conversation that had woven them closer. Yet a gnawing uncertainty remained if trials awaited them on this path towards love and understanding. Would they rise above, or would they find themselves lost in the very discord they sought to mend? As the flickering flames danced and cast elongated shadows, the villagers remained enshrouded in a silence punctuated only by the occasional crackle of wood. In this quiet reverie, echoes of shared fears mingled with tentative hopes about the journey that lay ahead. They were unwitting participants in a saga older than their ancestors, a narrative restless to unfold. The elder, still grappling with the weight of uncertainty in his heart, turned his gaze toward the night sky. What if, in our pursuit of understanding, we come face to face with adversities we deem insurmountable? The Samaritan faced a choice, yes, but was that choice a solitary struggle or a reflection of the community around him? His words hung in the air, speculative yet steeped in the gravity of his past. Closing her eyes as if to find clarity in the abyss, the woman who had voiced her fears earlier responded, "If we strip the Good Samaritan of the outcome we admire, we are left with an individual courageously responding to a moment." He was met with scorn as easily as he was met with gratitude. Her voice was but a whisper, yet it stirred the depths of every heart gathered there. The wounded man shifted uneasily, his brow furrowed. Yet we mustn't forget, it was the very vulnerability of the one in need that bore witness to the compassion of the Samaritan. When we offer our imperfections and expose our wounds, we invite others to extend their hands toward us. But will we find acceptance or rejection? Each word fell like heavy raindrops upon thirsty earth, igniting contemplation. An older woman, hunched yet resolute, dared to interject. And what if rejection is our trial? Are we prepared to risk our hearts knowing their willingness to embrace us might fade amidst the wounds of our own histories? Her words were enveloped in the pain of a past that had crafted her with both wisdom and wariness. With renewed purpose, the young man who had first spoken rose, presenting an outstretched hand. Perhaps the greatest truth lies not in how we may be received but in how we show up amidst fear and misunderstanding. If the Samaritan sought understanding despite rejection, then this journey is not so much about the destination but the path we illuminate for one another. Realization dawned on many, their expressions shifting from one of doubt to consideration. The community, experienced in complicity, became aware that the journey before them would not require perfection but instead a commitment to traverse together the jaggedness of their humanity. Suddenly, the child who had been so quiet stepped forward once more, clutching her stone tightly as if to offer it as a pledge of something greater. Maybe the stone isn't meant to symbolize strength alone. It could be a reminder that even the hardest rocks break and shatter with a little pressure, allowing new things to grow where emptiness once lay. Can we transform pain into possibilities? A hush fell upon the villagers. Her young, innocent wisdom blossomed like the olive trees around them. All at once, they were aware that their truths, once hidden or unspoken, might indeed serve as the fertile ground for growth. The possibility engraved deeply within their despair. Then reality pressed upon them heavier than the starlit sky. They would need to release their fears and judgments, to confront their own biases without pretense. But self-awareness is no easy task. particularly in the face of histories woven with neglect and misunderstanding. How will we take this first step toward transformation if the very act of seeing one another implies the possibility of pain? The elder asked, his voice trembling with the weight of this great unknown. It was a question that grazed the soul of every listener, echoing the truth they all feared yet hoped to embrace. As the night stretched onward under the watchful gaze of the heavens, a new uncertainty nestled within. Could they bear the revelations that awaited them? Would they find strength in vulnerability, or would they dissolve into the discomfort of their own histories? As the first light of dawn began to stretch across the horizon, bathing the village in hues of gold, a palpable tension hung in the air. The villagers, now deeply entwined in their shared contemplation, felt the stirrings of change beckoning them forward. The elder, standing resolutely under the ancient olive tree, surveyed their face, an amalgamation of hope, doubt, fear, and determination. Today, he began, his voice steady yet filled with an unshakable warmth, we have reached the heart of our journey. As the Good Samaritan showed us, our choices reveal the essence of who we are. Yet it is our collective response to those choices that will either fracture us or unite us. His words hung heavy with significance, igniting a spark in the hearts of those who listened. The wounded man, now fully upright, leaned forward, visibly enlivened by the palpable energy in the air. Perhaps it is indeed time to embrace our uncertainty not as a burden but as an opportunity. Just as the Samaritan took a risk to love a stranger, so too must we risk our hearts in order to discover the profound connections that await us. A whisper of realization seemed to ripple across the gathering, as one voice after another began to resonate with acceptance. The young man nodding fervently expressed, it is through our willingness to step forward, revealing our vulnerabilities, that we may discover the depths of compassion we have long sought. Yet skepticism still lingered within some hearts. What if our attempt to connect is met with resistance? A woman asked, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of struggles. What if, in our journey toward unity, we unearth more division? The elder nodded knowingly, as if touched by the truth in her words. Every journey bears trials, but like the stones of the road, they become stepping stones when we choose to navigate them together. We must accept that trials will come, but it is our reaction in the face of those trials that will define us. As the dawn broke fully, illuminating the world in golden light, a moment of clarity transpired within the crowd, a shared understanding that connection was not solely an act of kindness but also an act of courage amidst uncertainty and fear. Then, above the soft sounds of the morning, the child's laughter echoed again, sweet and clear. Can we promise to share what we find inside? Can we be brave enough to talk about our hurts together? She asked, her innocent wisdom piercing through the heaviness. The villagers looked at one another, understanding blooming anew. Yes, came the murmured agreement as the walls that had once stood so formidable began to tremble. The elder raised a hand as if to seal a pact, his heart pounding with zeal. Then let today be our awakening to the possibility of shared journeys. We must remember that in every act of love, however small, we honor one another's presence. The villagers nodded, emboldened as though the rising sun had cast away shadows. They began to share not only their fears but also their hopes, each story weaving into the fabric of a collective narrative that transcended boundaries and labeling. Together we can reflect on our pasts, understanding that transformation will require us to confront the failures we've held on to for so long, the wounded man said, his voice steady as he spoke with newfound vigor. Just as the Samaritan had to rise against the tide of tradition, so too must we challenge our long-standing beliefs, understanding that love is actionable and not merely a sentiment. With every shared story, every vulnerable exchange, cracks appeared in the cinder blocks of fear that had previously constructed their identities. For in that moment, something miraculous began to unfurl among them, a collective vision born from understanding that the heartbeats binding them together were stronger than the labels that sought to divide them. Thus, a season of healing commenced, enveloping them as they gathered day by day at the foot of the ancient olive tree. The village, once steeped in division, began to bloom in unexpected ways. The very act of shared vulnerability forged bonds no one had believed possible. And slowly, they discovered how bravery can redefine community, how the most profound transformations are born in the cracks of honesty. One evening, under starlit skies reflecting their renewed connection, the elder addressed the gathering with tears of joy. What began as a simple act of kindness has turned into a movement of grace, he said, overwhelmed with emotion. Together, we have shared our stories, our fears, and we have dared to extend compassion to one another, just as the Samaritan did. Our village stands as witness to the truth, that love is indeed a journey. In that moment, a deep and resounding silence fell as the villagers absorbed the weight of those words. Understanding crystallized into a collective commitment. They were no longer solely individuals defined by their divisions. Instead, they had become a community wounded yet healing, forever intertwined by the courage to confront life together, and so they learned that true goodness isn't merely about the actions we take, but the hearts we offer. It is about transforming the world through love, even when it challenges the very norms that had long governed them. They came to realize every encounter with a stranger could ignite a divine connection, every journey undertaken alongside one another a pathway to faith. As dawn continued to rise over the horizon, scattering the night's shadows, they stood united, forever changed by the revelation that life is a woven tapestry of stories, each thread distinct yet inherently connected, a silent reminder that what binds us is far greater than what divides us. Faith flourished as they chose to see not just with their eyes but with hearts wide open, embarking together toward an expansive horizon of possibility.